Hey guys, we're going to go ahead and get started here if you want to find somewhere to sit. Well, welcome to Russia Christi, everybody. I guess I see a couple new faces around, so it's exciting. Good to see you guys. If you want to join our email list, you can. There's a little QR code thing on the table over there if you want to scan that, or talk to me or any of the officers or staff here. I can help you out with that as well. And we're also selling copies of the book, Challenging Conversations, for $5. That's something that we are going to use in some of the lectures in the following weeks. So, talk to someone if you're interested in that as well. We're also doing member and officer election soon, which you'll hear more on in a couple minutes. But just to let you know about that, that is coming up. So without further, I'm going to pass it on here to Adam Jones.
One of the last roles that I played as a local church pastor was pastor of evangelism. And I wanted to bring a little bit of that to this group. And so the idea we've come up with is to put together an evangelism class, probably 5-6 week class, where we would get together and learn how to share the gospel, how to encourage people to trust in Jesus Christ, and practice with each other. One of the best ways to learn how to share the gospel is just practice, practice, practice. So we do a lot of role playing. So come and chat with me if you would like to be a part of this class. I know it's a busy time, but I'm thinking we would start the mid-month, like mid-March, and then go through April. So about 6 weeks, and depending on who wants to do it, we'll just talk together as a group and find out what time during the week would work best, whether it's a Tuesday night, a Sunday afternoon, a Saturday morning, something like that. So come and talk to me if you want to be a part of this class of learning how to share the gospel together, both on campus, with your friends and family. I think it'd be really, really beneficial. I encourage you to come be a part of it.
Tonight's all the announcements. I'm going to change the slide here. All right, there we go. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about student officers, our student elections for officers for the upcoming school year. Will be happening in roughly a month or so. And so if you are interested in becoming an officer with Ratio Christi, what that means is taking one of these roles, or you can see the other officers and responsibilities. If there's a particular interest that you have, talk to us and we'll see if there's a way that we can allow you or create space for you to serve in that capacity. But you do have to be a UNL student and a member of the Ratio Christi group in order to be a UNL RC officer. But I thought I'd go through real quickly just what it looks like, what the officer roles are, and then a little bit of the benefits that hopefully we'll be able to provide to you as a student who's willing to step into a leadership role for Ratio Christi. So of course we've got the president right now. Matt Romer has been serving as our president. He will be stepping down at the end of the year, at the end of this semester, to pursue his studies more intensely, and so we'll be looking to fill that role. But actually, each of the roles that we currently have, so Matt serving as president, Will serving as vice president, and Zach serving as our treasurer, each of those roles come up for election every single year. So if you are interested in serving in that capacity, talk to Wesley, myself, or Adam, and we can we'll put your name on the ballot, and then when we have the elections, we'll go from there. But the president, like you can see, is the formal representative for Ratio Christi here at the university. So that means if there are ever requests to do interviews, or there's a public interest piece that, say, the Daily Nebraskan would want to do, you as the president would be the one to be the point person on that, as well as initiating any events and kind of spearheading that communication between Ratio Christi as a group and the university. If you're interested in more of the details of what that role might look like, I'd encourage you to talk to Matt. He's had some fantastic experience over the last year putting on a number of events and organizing those. As far as vice president, for a point of clarity, the university also requires a primary programmer role, and we've just combined those two roles into the vice president capacity. The vice president works on recruiting and membership primarily. So any membership questions or questions about how you can become more involved, get on the email list, those are the types of things that the vice president will oversee. And then also recruiting efforts, so manning tables out front when we do those things alongside other officers and or staff. That would be one of the roles of the vice president. Treasurer is pretty straightforward, takes care of the finances, to what extent we have to deal with that with the university. And then the secretary is not a position that we currently have open or currently have filled, but it is a position that is open if there's interest in doing more of the logistical planning. And then under the other officers and responsibilities, we're looking at, or the way that we function as a team is often sharing a lot of the responsibilities as people have finals or are busy or have more time. Some of these responsibilities can be shuffled around among the officers and thus as staff as well. So things like that could be the social media oversight. I know there's been some interest here over the last few weeks about how our social media is run. And so there are ways, if you have a desire to serve the group here at UNL, there are ways for you to do that as an officer, even if you don't see your particular interest here up on the slide. But this is something that we're excited to offer to you as a benefit, and hopefully it will be a situation in which you grow as a person and as a leader, learning how to work in a team, managing a student group. I thought I'd just put this up here because this is important. As an officer, you are a spiritual leader of the group. This is a Christian organization. We're unashamedly Christian. And what that means is as a leader of the group, we as staff are entrusting you and looking to you as a very real sense of a spiritual leader for the group. Someone who's got maturity in their own walk with Christ, who understands the biblical teaching and is able and willing to articulate that to others. So this is actually language directly from our Constitution. It's the primary responsibility, as you can see, for all officers to live in a manner that is consistent with Christian beliefs and conduct and standards, to ensure that viewpoints of the organization are carried out and communicated effectively, and to make sure that they're consistent with Christian teaching and a biblical worldview. So that's something we see as important just to communicate to you. This is the standard that we feel is important for each of our leaders to adhere to. But in addition to the responsibilities and the different things that you would be doing as an officer, we want to offer resources and a return on investment for you as a student officer. And so this next semester we're going to be offering, we haven't done this in the past, but we'll be offering some additional training to you as an officer that can look different depending on what your interest is. So you can see a couple suggestions up there. The leadership training, that would be something where Wesley or Adam and I would kind of take you under our wing and potentially go through a book or work through some leadership material so that you can become a more effective, more capable leader personally. If your interest is really, hey, I'd like to understand apologetics more deeply, or I'd like to dig into Scripture and develop my own spiritual life more fully, that would be a way that we could go. And then also, I didn't want to say personal coaching because it's not necessarily one-on-one, but some professional coaching in that sense, where if you've got some personal goals that you would like to accomplish over the next year or during the time that you serve as an officer, I've had the opportunity to get a little bit of training into some coaching, and so I'd be happy to talk with you about what that might look like. And then in addition to those offerings, we would be providing you with the Gallup Strength Finders book, so you can have some personal development going through the Strength Finders assessment and seeing where God has gifted you as an individual. And then we would also be giving you, if you don't already have a copy, giving you a copy of the book Tactics, which is one of the texts that I think we reference daily in our work here at UNL and certainly weekly here on campus. So that's just kind of an overview of what the officers would be expected to do, some of the things that you could be involved in, and the ways that you can serve your fellow students here at Ratio Christi, and then also some of the benefits that you would receive. I think that's all I got, so Wesley, you can take it away.
All righty. You take that. I got this one. Thank you, Ben. Welcome, everybody. I am Wesley Farewell, and if you are new, one of our taglines is that we are an apologetics organization, which means we give good reasons and evidence for why God exists and why Christianity is true, and that is kind of the purpose of our group. This semester, we are working on win some conversations when you disagree. We're pursuing truth, we're sharing the gospel, and we're loving others. And so tonight we are in the middle of laying a kind of a good foundation for that, which is talking about logic. Last week, Ben, who was just up here, talked about logic and gave you kind of an overview of logic. So if you haven't seen that, go back and watch that on our YouTube channel. Tonight I will be exploring different logical fallacies. It's just when reasoning goes bad, and this is a good, exciting time, because then you can kind of learn how to see the logical fallacies, or the fallacies that are happening in conversation, but you can also avoid them yourself and help you. The purpose is just to kind of help you get a bit better at reasoning, get a bit better at critical thinking when you're having conversations. So here is the outline. We're going to go through track, T-R-A-C-K. I'm going to tell you what that means. Ben mentioned it last week. We're going to do formal fallacies, and then informal fallacies, and then 10 principles to avoid fallacious reasoning that we're kind of weaving in the whole time. And then I'm going to give you a big list because there are a lot of informal fallacies, and I'm not going to get through them all. And if you have a favorite one that you wanted or you've heard of that's on that list that's at the end, you can raise your hand and we'll get that going. So first we're going to talk about track. So to borrow from Ben's slides from last week, here is just kind of the basics of what an argument needs in order to be an argument. If there's no evidence to prove a statement, then you don't actually have an argument. You just have assertions, kind of asserting things. If there's no conclusion, you just don't have an argument either. You just have facts or information. So then he went on to talk about track, and track stands for true, relevant, adequate, clear, and knowledge. And these are ways that you can remember to evaluate premises of an argument. So there's premise, conclusion usually, and for yourself, you need to go through that whole list and see if all of your premises are true, relevant, accurate, clear, and knowledgeable. But also, when you are evaluating others, go through that whole list, true, relevant, accurate, clear, and knowledgeable. So that's kind of just in the background. I wanted to start with that because that is the kind of the underpinning of everything, and kind of a concise version of that 10 big list that we'll talk about after all of the fallacies. So don't get too lost. All right, so we talked about track, formal fallacies. Ready? Formal fallacies, there's formal ones and there's informal ones. Formal ones only have to do with the form or structure of the argument. They can usually be readily seen because they make some error in reasoning through the deductive argument. So the premises, conclusion, something went wrong and you can see didn't commit a formal fallacy, and add a not. That makes it a formal fallacy. You can see it on his face. It doesn't follow anymore, right? What about adding a not in here? Yes, it doesn't follow anymore. I'm belaboring this point. There's no following when it doesn't work anymore. So that all commits a formal fallacy. These are just formal fallacies having to do with the form, okay? What if Iron Man is a potato? Still doesn't follow with the premises, okay? One of the premises is untrue. Iron Man is not a potato, therefore Iron Man lives in the Marvel universe. Doesn't make sense, doesn't follow. So that is a formal fallacy. The argument is invalid. Now, this one, the argument is invalid. The premises are all true, but the argument is invalid because it doesn't follow. It still doesn't follow. It's a non sequitur. So all I'm saying with these formal fallacies is usually you can see it on its face that it commits a formal fallacy. You don't have to do too much digging to look at the premises and see if it follows, see if it's sound, are the premises true. That is what a formal fallacy is. Okay, so formal fallacies. Now the fun stuff. There's a jillion informal fallacies, and I probably have too many in here, but I like all of them. So we're going to talk about informal fallacies. Informal fallacies are separate than formal fallacies because you actually have to consider the reasoning, consider the content of the reasoning a bit more. So when formal fallacies have to do with the form or structure. Informal fallacies have to do with the supporting evidence and whether or not the conclusion makes sense with that. So the statement or claim is not supported with adequate reasons for acceptance. Now, I do want to give you guys a word of caution, a word of warning here, is that when you learn some of these, this has happened to me these past couple weeks when I've been preparing for this, when you learn some of these, you may become conceited, and you may want to wield this new knife at everybody that you see and say, "Ha-ha, you have committed an ad hominem, therefore, mama." So, here's a word of warning. Don't be conceited with the information you get. I'm going to give you some tools, and I'm going to teach you what informal fallacies are. You will be able to see them. So just like Loki here became a little too prideful, you can become a little too prideful knowing a few informal fallacies, okay? So watch yourself, check yourself, make sure that you don't do it yourself. It's not impressive when you call out an informal fallacy when you're talking to a friend. You're like, "Oh, that's a tu quoque fallacy," which I said to my mom last week. Not smart, okay? So be aware of when you learn these things, okay? So here are the 6 that we're going to talk about first, and then we'll talk about another ones, and then we'll keep moving on. We're going to talk about straw man, red herring, ad hominem, genetic, circular, and the fallacy, which is what I ended with. So a visual representation of the straw man looks like this. Straw man fallacy is when you misrepresent someone's argument to make it easier to attack. So the arguer distorts the opponent and then attacks the distorted argument. Just like the name suggests, it's a straw man. You build up a straw man, and then you attack that straw man and claim victory, right? Here is a cartoon example. One man says, "We should liberalize the law on marijuana." Man number 2, "No way, unlimited access to drugs would contribute to massive increase of drug abuse." Okay, man, you missed the point the guy was saying. You didn't interact with the content of what he was saying. You mischaracterized what he was saying by saying unlimited access. He didn't say unlimited access to drugs, but then he took down his own straw man, right? Another example is the school lunch budget should examine to cut out waste, and this guy yells, the guy wants our children to starve. It's a bit further on and kind of yells at him for that. But watch out, though. Being a straw man fallacy is not as easy to spot. Sometimes it's a lot more sneaky than this. There was a recent debate between David Wood and Muhammad Hijab where David Wood says, "According to the Quran, Allah prays for Muhammad. So I ask you, who does Allah pray to?" Muhammad Hijab says, "David Wood says that Allah prays to Muhammad. I knew I would need to give you a free Arabic lesson today. That's why the translators put for, not to, the prophet." Now, did you catch all that? Probably not, because it went really quickly. But that's how the debate went. And so Muhammad Hijab attacked David Wood for saying Allah prays for Muhammad, not to Muhammad. But David Wood didn't claim he prays to Muhammad. He said Allah prays for Muhammad and asked him, who is Allah praying to? And so Muhammad Hijab mischaracterized his argument and then attacked his own mischaracterization, which is a straw man fallacy. So sometimes it's a lot sneakier than this, so you have to be aware, kind of know what the actual argument was, and then hear what the rebuttal is, and explain what's going on. So the way to avoid committing this yourself is, so that you don't do it yourself, be sure to adequately understand your opponent's view. Ask things like, "What do you mean by that?" Or, "Let me see if I understand you. Are you saying," and then repeat to them what you think they're saying so that they can correct you, so that you can actually focus on the argument at hand. So how to navigate it when it happens to you: narrate the conversation. This is a piece of advice I'm going to give you a lot tonight. Narrate the conversation. Explain that isn't your view. So if somebody did a straw man on you, explain that isn't your view. Use the words that they said and explain that is a misrepresentation, and then restate your own claim. And be charitable, because sometimes it's not on purpose. Next, red herring. So red herring focuses on arguing for an irrelevant topic with the intention of distracting the audience or or moving somewhere else. This usually happens when the other person, the person committing the red herring, finds that argument easier to outline. So some half straw man, but could also be just kind of moving off of the topic is what it is. So the person committing the red herring draws off track with a different topic. It could be related or unrelated, but definitely not engaging with what the argument was, and then asserts their own position. It could be understood as just diverting attention away, like, hey, look over there. That's sort of what it is, kind of characterized simply. And if you're not careful, if you're not paying attention, you can be drawn away pretty easily. This happened to me a whole lot in conversations where I wanted to talk about whatever that was that they brought up, and I chased it. And then so we just jumped around from topic to topic, didn't get anything done. So a cartoon example is, why didn't God stop the shooting? How could he? He's not allowed in schools anymore. While poignant, does not answer the person's question. The person was asking, why didn't God stop the shooting? And then this guy took the opportunity to bring up a different topic. Two separate topics. Can you see how they didn't involve, they're moving it away. It's a red herring. It's designed to distract. Another example is from Students for Life, where this lady is arguing that abortion is a moral wrong and should be stopped. A questioner came up and asked, how do you propose we solve the problems for these children that are suffering? And she chose to answer this question very poignantly, very interestingly. She asked her, are you upset with the American Diabetes Association that they don't fight cancer? And she said no. And she asked her why, and she said, well, because they're the Diabetes Foundation. And she goes, exactly, I'm anti-abortion. So like, making this point, you're bringing up something else when my purpose is to do this. You're bringing up a different issue related, and we can talk about it, but not the issue at hand, not the abortion is a moral wrong and should be stopped. And this questioner didn't get it because right afterwards she asked, you didn't answer my question for a proposed solution to the issues in foster care and child homelessness. So, I mean, this type of thing happens. It could be related, but it could also not be. And she chose not to get distracted from her point. So, the way to avoid committing a red herring yourself, stay on topic, focus on the issue that's brought up, write it down if you have to. I've had to do that now. It's like, okay, we're talking about Bible reliability. Don't move from Bible reliability. So I make sure to narrate the conversation, bring it back. How to navigate when it happens to you? Once again, narrate the conversation. Don't interrupt the person, but explain that the conversation got off track. Kind of narrate what happened. Say, hey, we were talking about this, and then you brought up a different issue. I like to put things spatially in different places, and so I say, well, this is a different issue, so could we put this over here for now and talk about this so that they see it, I see it, and tell them you'd be happy to discuss that, but we're currently talking about this. It just kind of narrates the conversation. It helps people know what happened, where things went. So that's red herring. Ad hominem. Ad hominem. Attacking the opponent's character or personality traits in an attempt to undermine their argument. So arguer 1 presents an argument. Arguer 2 verbally attacks the person and then rejects their argument. So there's 3 different types of ad hominem. Ad hominem means against the person. So there's abusive, circumstantial, and tu quoque. Abusive is just verbally attacking the person, kind of just verbally abusing them. Circumstantial says that the opponent is predisposed to argue as the person does, and therefore you shouldn't trust what they say, because of course they're going to argue that way. It's kind of calling into question their motives. And tu quoque just means you too, so it's calling the other person a hypocrite. So some examples come from if you're giving an argument and someone just calls you closed-minded, you can say, okay, well, whether or not that's true doesn't much have to do with the argument itself. I could be closed-minded, maybe, but are you going to interact with the argument? Now, depending on if they already did interact with the argument and you guys have been down the road again and you haven't really, and you are closed-minded, then maybe you are, and maybe take their advice. But if it's kind of just right away, you're closed-minded, it's more of an abusive. It's more of an ad hominem abusive. They're just calling you names. And whether or not you're a jerk, whether or not you're conceited, doesn't necessarily affect the argument at hand. So other examples could be Democrats are a bunch of unpatriotic communist morons. Well, maybe, but are you going to interact with what they are proposing? Or Republicans are a gang of heartless, greedy Nazis. Well, maybe, but are you going to interact with the content that they're proposing, the arguments that they're putting forth? Ad hominem circumstantial is an example. Here's an example. Christian-oriented scientists who argue for an old earth are clearly compromisers, for they care more about what their secular scientific colleagues think than they do about what the Word of God clearly teaches. So this person is calling into question Christian-oriented scientists trying to look better for their colleagues, and that's why they hold the view. Therefore, their view should be rejected. That's ad hominem circumstantial. You're attacking the person's character rather than interacting with the argument that they have for holding that view. And tu quoque is, the dad says, son, you shouldn't smoke, it's not good for you. The dad says, the son says, Dad, how can you say that? You smoke 3 packs a day. It's a paraphrase from a Beastie Boys song. Calling the other person a hypocrite for saying what they said in order to take away their argument. You shouldn't smoke, it's bad for you, you smoke 3 packs a day. Whether or not he smokes 3 packs a day is irrelevant based on what he said. It's bad for you. Is it bad for you? It doesn't matter that he smokes 3 packs a day. Is it bad for you? Interact with the argument he gave, right? So that would be tu quoque, basically a you too, you're a hypocrite. So how to avoid committing it yourself. Remember to interact with the argument itself and avoid assumptions about the person's motives or character issues regarding the person, unless relevant. Now, here's an asterisk for you. How to navigate when, or redirect when it happens to you. Once again, narrate the conversation. Explain humbly that whether or not the accusation is true has no bearing on the argument, unless it does. If the argument, if it does have to do with the argument, then it would be relevant. Here's an example of an ad hominem fallacy that's not an actual ad hominem fallacy. Here's an argument of, let me say that again. Here's an example of an ad hominem that's not an ad hominem fallacy. Just for your edification here. So jurors in a courtroom need to know if the witness has been found guilty of perjury in the past. Here, believability is closely connected to discerning truth. So if this witness has committed perjury in the past is relevant, so it is still an ad hominem. You're attacking the person's character, not the argument that they're not their witness, not their statements on the witness stand. It is hurting their credibility in what they're saying. Have they committed perjury in the past? Do they have so that would be when ad hominem would be relevant. So that and other similar circumstances, if it's the logical issue at hand, ad hominem would be a relevant issue. But often it's more of a, hey, you're a jerk, so I'm not going to listen to what you say. All right, genetic fallacy. Genetic fallacy is judging an idea, product, or person untrustworthy or good or bad on the basis of where it comes from or from whom it comes, kind of the origin, such as like racial or geographical, or kind of where the origin of it. So arguer 1 states an argument coming to a conclusion, and then arguer 2 points to where they got that idea and then questions those origins in an attempt to undermine their conclusion that they're making. Okay? So an example would be, Hitler was behind the development of the Volkswagen, so you shouldn't buy one. I looked this up. He was. He like commissioned or was at the behest of Hitler. Ferdinand Porsche made it, which is super cool. But does that mean the Volkswagens are tainted with Nazis? Well, no, not really. He's the one who was behind it, but that's the origins. That's the origin of the story. Does that have anything to do with the goodness or the badness of a Volkswagen? Here's another one that could kind of cross into different ones. You're not allowed to have an opinion on abortion because you're a man. Questioning the origins of an arguer in order to invalidate their opinion or their argument that they have. Or some legislators oppose abortion because it may cause psychological damage to women, but these people are all Christians and everyone knows the Christian church is anti-abortion. Once again, just kind of questioning where it comes from in order to dismiss the argument that that they're making. Or belief in God arises from fear, primarily fear of the unknown, and especially fear of death. Reason and logic have nothing to do with belief in a divine nature. This type of thing, it's where it comes from, where it originates. Does it mean it's bad? Does it mean it isn't true or isn't a good belief or argument to have? Not necessarily. I've heard this one. You're only a Christian because you were born in America. If you were born in India, you'd be a Hindu. If you were born in Pakistan, you'd be a Muslim. Maybe, but that has no bearing on the truthfulness of any of those ideologies. But the arguer is trying to undermine the reason you hold something. So that's the genetic fallacy. How to avoid committing it. Remember to interact with the argument. Avoid assumptions about where it comes from. How to navigate or redirect when it happens to you. Once again, narrate the conversation. This is a very good tool in your toolbox. Explain humbly that the truthfulness of a claim doesn't depend on its origins. And then maybe provide a simplified example like if an inmate in a prison develops a formula that cures cancer. From where it comes from doesn't have anything to do with the efficacy or truthfulness of that claim or of that idea or of that cure. It has no bearing on that. So providing simple examples of those things are very beneficial. Circular reasoning. When one reasons begins with a claim that they are trying to conclude with, or a circular argument where the conclusion is included in the premise. So this is where the arguer who commits this asserts a conclusion, and then asserts a conclusion and says, see? Things like, whatever is less dense than water will float because such objects won't sink in water. Women should be able to have abortions, so abortions should be legal and easily accessible. Or this one, the Bible is true because it says it's true. These are all circular arguments. You're beginning with a claim that you're trying to prove. So you're just asserting the conclusion of an argument and asserting the conclusion of an argument. These are all circular reasons, and they are bad reasoning. How to avoid committing this yourself? Check your premises. Do any of them sneak in your conclusion? That'd be one. How to navigate? Narrate the conversation. Explain that they're assuming the conclusion to be true before, and then asserting the conclusion. Be patient. This one is a little harder to accept, especially if they're used to reasoning this way. I'll give you an example that I interact with a lot, that I will probably interact with next week. We're traveling on a mission trip, Ben and I and Janae and my wife, and we're taking another student from Iowa. We're going to go to Utah for an evangelism trip, and we're going to talk to members of the Latter-day Saints. They have built in their ideology a circular argument for why the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the one true church. In Moroni 10, 4 and 5, it talks about if you question if these things are true, ask God with a sincere heart, and He'll manifest the truth of it. So the things that you're questioning is if the Book of Mormon is true, or if the Latter-day Saint faith is true, you're supposed to, according to Moroni 10, 4 and 5, ask God, and He'll give you He'll manifest the truth of it to you. But the thing you're questioning is if the Book of Mormon itself is true. And it says how to test if it's true in the book itself. And so you're supposed to pray about this. So you're praying about something that you're already trusting is true. Because if Moroni 10, 4 and 5 is false, then why would you start there? Do you guys see it? So this is something that they're used to reasoning like this, and it takes a while to pull that out or try to point that out to them. So just be patient. I need to be patient. But this is something that is built into that ideology already. Okay, enough of that. Please let me know, shout out, I suppose, what fallacy of these 6 is this graphic committing? Ad hominem, yep. It also could be a straw man, because you're mischaracterizing what they're saying and kind of putting in something else. Ad hominem is correct. Thank you very much. Good job. Which one is this one? Clean up this mess. But why? Because it needs to be cleaned. Circular reasoning. Thank you. Starting with a premise, concluding because it needs to be cleaned. You've snuck that in at the beginning. All right, last one of this one, of these examples. Media claims that the senator was taking bribes, but we all know the credibility of the media, right? Yeah. Say it again. Genetic fallacy is correct because you're questioning where the source comes from in order to discredit the source. Okay. Here is an audio-visual portion.
Listen up, big guy. I got 3 good reasons why you should just walk away. Number 1, look at that guy. He's got that sissy stringy music thing.
We've been through this. It's a harp, and you know it.
All right, that's a harp, and that's a dress.
Robe.
Reason number 2, look what I can do.
What? What does that have to do with anything?
No. He's got a point.
Demon and angel come and talk to them, and he gives him 3 good reasons. He says 3, he only gives 2. What happened in here? What arguments, what fallacious arguments were made? Ad hominem was the first one, yes. Ad hominem, he said, look at that guy. He's got that sissy music stringy thing. And then what was the second one? Red herring. Yeah, look what I can do. Just and then Crunk even says, I don't see what that has to do with anything. Right? So, good job, you guys are now experts. Now, throwing a wrench into everything, the fallacy. The fallacy is something that you guys need to understand because if it's presuming that an argument, if it's been poorly argued or contains a fallacy, that the claim itself that they're making must be false, must be wrong. So if an arguer is poorly reasoned or has actually committed a formal fallacy or an informal fallacy, that therefore it must be wrong, right? So this guy makes a fallacious conclusion, comes to a conclusion through a fallacious means, and then arguer 2 assumes it's false. That's not necessarily true because the claim itself could still be true, just poorly argued, right? Let's look at an example from, you guessed it, Ben's slides. Ben said, all students of UNL graduate with honor, therefore, or Ben was a UNL student, therefore, Ben did not graduate with honor. That is a formal fallacy, but is the conclusion necessarily false? The answer is no. That is an actually true conclusion. Ask him about it. He'll say, yes, it's true. And then he'll tell you the whole story. He told me earlier. Next, grass is green, sky is blue, therefore the earth is round. Commits a formal fallacy because it doesn't follow from the premises. So does that mean that the conclusion is false? Of course not, right? They did commit a formal fallacy. It's just poor reasoning. Don't reason that way. It's just, so don't assume that because they've committed a formal fallacy, therefore throw out their argument, right? Still interact with, just help think well. This is what we're trying to do, right? Love others and share the gospel and all those things that we're trying to do here. This is what we're doing. Okay. Now it's time for you to talk to each other. Have you encountered any of these, or have you been guilty of any of these? You have an entire 3 minutes. Talk to some people around you. Ready to go. All right. Come on back. Finish your thought. And then turn your chairs back to the presenter. It's this guy. Chip, chop, chip. All right. Awesome, guys. Thanks. Nice work. Okay, so I want to go through another set of informal fallacies. I'm only going to go through 5, and it's going to be less heavy. So it's just I'm going to explain the fallacy and then give a few examples and moving on. Okay, so and then we'll do that same thing where you guys get to talk and talk about these 5 now. So this one is Texas sharpshooter, proving too much, personal incredulity, appeal to nature, and burden of proof. So these 5, Texas sharpshooter is cherry-picking data clusters to suit an argument, or to find or finding a pattern to fit a presumption. So you are picking certain evidences that fit your conclusion that you want to come to, and then presenting it as a conclusion that is correct. So example, and I'll put them up so that you can read them. The makers of extreme sugar candy point to research showing that of the 5 countries where extreme candy sells the most units, 3 of them are in the top 10 healthiest countries on earth. Therefore, extreme sugar candy products are healthy. They're finding certain data clusters that suit what they want to say. It doesn't necessarily follow. Next would be the arguments that say that Jesus is a copy of Mithras, Horus, or Osiris. I did an entire talk on this last semester. Go watch it. It's awesome. Basically, what they're doing, what these guys do that have these arguments, they find data and kind of misrepresent what it is, and then put, whatever their favorite, one of these guys, Mithras or whoever, and then Jesus, and then say, look at all these parallels. They're the same. When actually what they're doing is, one of the things they're doing is picking things out and ignoring other things. Another example, climate change is a hoax, look at these statistics. Or climate change is reality, look at these statistics. These types of things could be done. Now, I'm not saying anything about one way or the other about this issue, but this type of informal fallacy can occur if you're not paying attention. Proving too much is an argument that reaches a conclusion which contradicts things that are known to be true or contradicts the premises in that argument. So what that means is you prove too much with what your argument is intending to conclude. Okay? So, first example, fire is a bad thing because there are many fires which burn down property and cost lives. Therefore, fire is bad. Contradicting things we know to be true or contradicting a premise in the argument. The court should acquit that murderer because Jesus would forgive. This is proving too much. Jesus would forgive, therefore we should acquit all murderers. This was an argument by, I believe it's Mother Teresa said this. This proves too much. It's going too far with what you're trying to say. Here's an example from the Bible. Luke 11:15 says, he casts out demons by Beelzebul. And Jesus actually, in verse 19, says, if I cast out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your sons cast them out? Saying, if this is the reason why, well, first he talks about how a house divided against itself can't stand. But then he says, if this is truly how I cast out demons, what are we to do with the stories that we hear of your sons? Wouldn't it also apply to them? They're proving too much with their accusation. All right, moving on. Personal incredulity, saying that because one finds something difficult to understand or complex, that it is therefore not true. A way that this happens is this statement: the eye is an incredibly complex biomechanical machine with thousands of interlocking parts. How could that exist without an intelligent designer? Now, just to be fair, this is personal incredulity if this is all we know. Side note, when I was researching a lot of examples, a lot of them are very anti-Christian or anyway, it was just great. If you do any of this research, it's rails on the Christian worldview. It's a lot of fun to see. Anyway, because this is an argument that proponents of intelligent design make, but it's not this specific words. This is an argument from personal incredulity. This is so complex, therefore it must be designed. No, the argument is actually, I don't have time. Whenever we see specified complexity, we see a designer. There's not ever an instance of specified complexity without a designer behind it, and so they're making an inductive argument that there must be a mind behind that. Moving on. I've heard this at my doorstep. The Trinity is incomprehensible. Christianity must be untrue, or the Trinity must be false. I heard that on my doorstep from some members of Jehovah's Witnesses. It's one of their tactics, because Trinity is kind of hard to understand, and therefore they like to attack it because it's something that they disbelieve in, and so they try to wrap that in there. It's too hard to understand. It's nonsense. Look at our version that we have. It's much simpler, right? This must be true. Or the resurrection hypothesis involves a person raising from the dead. That's impossible. Therefore, that's not the best explanation. This would be an argument from personal incredulity, saying that because something is difficult to understand, that it is therefore untrue. Appealing to nature, making the argument that because something is natural, it is therefore valid, justified, inevitable, good, or ideal. So they're appealing to nature. This is an argument. So tigers eat meat, so vegetarians must be wrong. Saying that because this happens in the wild, this must be the ideal. This must be the right thing. Marijuana should be legal. It grows in the ground. It's a natural thing. This is the argument that is made sometimes, that is an appeal to nature. Because it's natural, therefore it's good. There's a lot of poisons that grow in the ground that, if ingested, is or used improperly. Or this one, homosexuality is wrong because you don't see animals in same-sex relationships. This is an argument from appealing to nature, and it is a bad reason to conclude that homosexuality is wrong. I would not advocate for this argument. It's an appealing to nature. It's as ideal, right? This one isn't so much an informal fallacy, but it is something that happens a lot in conversation, so I need you to be aware of it. The burden of proof, saying that the burden of proof lies not with the person making the claim, but rather with someone else to disprove. Example 1, I maintain that long-term solar cycles are the cause of global warming. Show me I'm wrong. This is making a claim, asking people to disprove. It's not on me to back up my claim, it's on you to disprove. This is from the book Tactics that Ben mentioned earlier, called The Professor's Ploy, where the professor says, the Bible is just a bunch of fables and fairy tales, and the Christian student raises the hand and says, what do you mean by fables? Is everything in the Bible a fanciful invention? And the professor says, you must be one of those fundamental Christians who thinks the Bible is the inspired word of God. Why don't you stand up and explain why you think that? So, and this has happened in real life before, so I'm not trying to mischaracterize the professor, but the Christian could raise their hand, continue the conversation and say, I actually haven't given my view. For all you know, I'm on your side. I was asking for you to clarify your statement. Or the Christian says, God exists, tell me why you think he doesn't. And the atheist says, I didn't say he doesn't. You made the claim, you're supposed to back it up. Or just kind of similar to what Adam did today with his sign. If you saw it on the way in, it says God does not exist, prove me wrong. Kind of like the Steven Crowder guy. He sits, this is the popular meme that goes around, and all these things, and says, change my mind at the bottom. This would be a burden of proof, like kind of a switch thing. Like, I believe this, disprove me. This is just kind of you have to be aware of it in conversation. The main point is that the one who makes the claim bears the burden of proof. Now, I'm not saying that Adam was making this on purpose or to be deceptive, or that Steven Crowder himself is being rude this way, because I'm sure that Adam has reasons to back up his claim, or Steven Crowder has reasons to back up his claim. So this is kind of more of a tool to get conversation going. But if you're having in conversation and you notice that you haven't made a claim but the other person did, and they're making you disprove that claim, that would be a place where you need to narrate the conversation and use prudence when you're talking to that person. So, those 5, have you encountered any of those, or have you committed some of them yourself? 3 minutes, go. All right. Come on back. Pay attention to the man up front. All right, good stuff, guys. Thank you for interacting and hanging out and learning a little bit about a couple of my favorite informal fallacies. So just to review what we've gone through, we went through track, true, relevant, accurate, clear, and knowledgeable, and then we went through formal fallacies, and in all of our informal fallacies, now we're going to do this big old 10 principles to avoiding fallacious reasoning. Now, when I was looking at this, I saw this and I thought this is a pretty big list that's just kind of shoved here, so I broke it down a little bit to show you that they fit into these categories of our track acronym, okay? Just to kind of help your mind wrap around all of them, because there's 10 sentences that I'm going to say that are going to pop up here, and they kind of fit in each one of these. And not to change things, but the true is actually just all of them. So I didn't put it in all of them. So just know that true, it always has to be true. All right, so number one, a first principle to avoid fallacious reasoning is focus critical attention on backing an argument with solid support, evidence, reasons, and facts, and avoid irrelevant emotional appeals. So this is the only one that I wrote that contains all of them, but that would make sense. Number two, openly acknowledge and seek to fairly justify any worldview presuppositions, which helps you avoid inappropriate presumption. That has to do with knowledge. Know your stuff. 3, exercise caution in analyzing causal relationships and conceptual comparisons. There's a lot of informal fallacies that have to do with comparing things and kind of making them equal or making them completely opposite, things like that. That has to do with relevance. Number 4 would be present substantive evidence in support of an argument. That would be adequate. It has to be substantive. It has to have to do with those things. Number 5, ensure that an argument's reflect clarity of thought and expression. That would be the clear version of track. See how these all are fitting together. 7, by 7 I mean 6, identify the right kind of evidence necessary to make a good argument. This has to do with relevance and adequacy. 7, respond directly to an opponent's argument and avoid character-related issues unless they're the logical issue at hand. So true and relevant, make sure they're relevant. Number 8, take time and effort to gain a correct understanding of the opponent's position. This is what I mentioned way at the beginning when I said narrate the conversation, ask, let me see if I understand you correctly, are you saying? And then repeat back what you think they're saying so that they can correct you. This is just being courteous. We're teaching you how to have winsome conversations here. This is valuing your talking partner enough to clarify what they mean. Understand for yourself. This is probably the first one of the first main things that you have to do is understand their position correctly. 9, stay on topic when offering a rebuttal. Right? Don't throw the red herring somewhere and say, well, I want to talk about this. And you're like, no, stay on topic, interact with the content. 10, render a fair assessment of all evidence for an opponent's position. This has to do with being clear and knowledgeable, actually rendering a fair assessment rather than mischaracterizing it or dismissing it out of hand. Those are the 10 principles to avoid fallacious reasoning. I put this table here so that you can see that really, if you understand truly what true, relevant, adequate, clear, and knowledgeable are, then you can really get to the bottom of actually having a good conversation with somebody. All right, so we went through track, formal fallacies, informal fallacies, 10 principles to avoid fallacious reasoning. Now I have a big list for you that we're going to go over. First, I'm going to show you all of the some categories that they can fit in. These aren't all the categories, and these aren't all the informal fallacies. There's a bunch of them, but they are a lot of more of the ones that you encounter a bit more. So what we're going to do now is I want you to raise your hand or shout out one that you want me to explain, and we'll do a few of these, and then maybe 2 or 3, depending on how many we have. If nobody raises their hand, I have one that I'm excited to talk about, 1 or 2 actually. So here are the categories some that they could be categorized, and sometimes they fit in the same ones. Relevance, weak induction, presumption, ambiguity, and illicit transference. So these are the big categories. Here is my giant list. So go ahead and shout out which one you want me to talk about, and I'll pull up my cheat sheet at the bottom here and explain just the definition and then one or two examples, depending on how many I have in there. The asterisks denote there's more fallacies underneath that other one. So which one would you like me to talk about right now? Yes? No true Scotsman. That is a good one. Let me push Control F. That's not what I meant. Scots. All right, no true Scotsman. Making what could be called, oh, hey, you can see that, can't you? Ha, how embarrassing. No, you can't. Okay, good. I was like, oh, no. You see all my, anyway. Making what could be called an appeal to purity as a way to dismiss relevant criticisms or flaws of an argument. So it's similar to appeal to nature in terms of this is the right way, this is the true thing, therefore we're not gonna interact with that. But no true Scotsman is Sarah always wears slacks. Real women don't wear slacks, so Sarah's not a real woman. Or John drinks alcohol. No real Christian drinks alcohol, therefore John is not a real Christian. So you're setting up a rule that there's no true Scotsman out there because no true Scotsman really does these things. Next. Hasty generalization. Hasty. A general conclusion is drawn from an atypical sample. So, Hitler was a vegetarian, therefore I don't trust any vegetarians. Or I've worked with 3 born-again Christians. All 3 were obnoxious and holier than thou. Born-again people and their churches must be a bunch of hypocrites. So you're making a hasty generalization based on an atypical sample or a small sample that may not be applicable to the entire scope. Yes, so before I answer that, yes, some of these can be very similar in what they have, but often there's just a different emphasis that they're making, or there's an example that fits under this that doesn't fit under this one. Otherwise, they would be the same thing. And often, there's so many different names for the same fallacy, oftentimes. So, how is hasty generalization different? Check. Nailed it. All right. Hasty generalization doesn't have to necessarily do with origins. It can just be, because I've worked with 3 born-again Christians who are all obnoxious. It's a picking of a smaller sample to apply to the whole sample, rather than I'm not going to trust this person because they're associated with this other person. I think there's a list here where it's sufficient but not necessary type things. So I think maybe all genetic fallacies are hasty generalizations, but not all hasty generalizations are genetic fallacies. And I can work into that later and pick apart what I should have said. Good question, thank you. Another one. Amphibole. Ooh, that one's fun. Amphibole is in the ambiguity category that has equivocation, so it's similar to equivocation. Amphibole is a conclusion depends on an incorrect interpretation of an ambiguous statement made by someone other than the arguer. So the arguer makes a statement, and then an incorrect interpretation of that statement would be the fallacious thing. So Jimmy's son Bucko likes World War II more than his father. But how can a boy like war more than he likes his own dad? Jimmy's son Bucko likes World War II more than his father. But how can a boy like war more than his own dad? So he's misunderstanding what that statement is. And amphibole, it's also kind of could be interpreted that way, right? It's wrong, and you wouldn't, but they did. And it's kind of, kind of like, could be used in jokes and stuff. I'm thinking of that leg named Peg or whatever. Thank you, Anna. She knows. All right. Yes? Ooh, complex question is when you sneak in the multiple questions are concealed in a single question. So this is what Ben was talking about a couple weeks ago, where you there's no good way to get out of it. I said it was a leading question. I was wrong. Ben put me on the spot. I hadn't studied this yet. It was embarrassing. But he was the one on camera, so it didn't matter. Complex question. So are you going to admit that you're wrong? So answering yes would prove you're wrong. Answering no would imply that you accept that you're wrong, but you won't admit it. So it presumes guilt anyway. Have you stopped plagiarizing other people's works yet? Yeah, so either way it implies guilt. Complex question. Yes, so yeah, well, sort of. Loaded question has a meaning behind it, and a complex question has no way out. Yeah. Hit it. Because this took a long time, man. That's why. Yes. Appeal to pity. That was one I wanted to do. Thank you. Pity. Okay. Appeal to pity. The arguer elicits pity from the reasoner, or from the reader. So they say, I know I failed the exam last week, but the events surrounding Hurricane Katrina have really bothered me. My family used to live in New Orleans, so I deserve to retake the test. So he's saying, I deserve special treatment because of these sad things. Now, things are sad, and the professor could be lenient, but it's presuming you're eliciting pity from them in order to get something like that. I have heard this out on the next to the fountain out there when I tabled. If abortion is on demand is outlawed, then desperate women will seek illegal back alley abortions with rusty coat hangers, leading to an untold harm of thousands of needless deaths. The guy said it was put like that. He's appealing to pity. He's saying, if abortion's outlawed, that's not going to reduce the number of abortions. It's just going to make them more unsafe. And that's like, that hurts. You're like, oh, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be the cause of that. That's appealing to pity rather than interacting with the substance of the argument about abortion. Okay, we could probably do one or two more if you would like. I wanted to go over the false dichotomy. Thank you for asking. Oh, it's so much fun. Okay, false dichotomy is an either-or, like an either this or this premise hides additional alternatives. So it's put as an either-or, but it's not actually an either-or. Famously, Euthyphro's dilemma. Euthyphro's dilemma says, in modern words, either God says something is good because it is good, or something is good because God says so. So if God, so that's the dilemma that's put forth. Either God said something is good because it is, or something is good because God says so. If God says something is good because it's good, that makes good something outside of God that he appeals to. If something is good because God said so, that makes good arbitrary or whatever God says. Right? So the way to see, the way to recognize a false dichotomy is to replace the substance of the content of the argument with variables. Either A or B, because either God says something is good because it is good, or something is good because God said so. Those things in variables are A or B. A true dilemma is actually constructed this way, either A or not A. It's not A or B, because if it's A or B, there could be more variables involved. Okay, so a true dilemma would be either God says something is good because it's good, or God does not say something is good because it's not good, or whatever the not is. I messed that up. But that is what a false dichotomy is. It's presenting an either-or that's not actually an either-or. There are more variables involved. Any other questions? Because we are done with this portion of the argument. Hiding that. It's gone. Oh, because I'm not on it. I'm on my Word document. How embarrassing. Questions? Composition. The fallacy of composition. So this one is an attribute is incorrectly transferred from the parts to the whole. So illicitly applying characteristics of the part to the whole. So each tile on, this is a nice one, each tile on the floor is square, therefore the whole floor is square. Because each part is square from parts to the whole, right? Used appropriately, each tile on the floor is white, therefore the floor is white, right? It kind of depends on what you're actually describing, but it doesn't follow that if each part of each tile is squared, therefore the room is square, right? That's composition. And division is just the opposite of that, right? The room is square, therefore each tile is square. Cool. I don't know. I don't know. They just happen in reasoning, and people just kind of notice that they aren't good reasons to hold. And that's why logic is very important, is because then you actually figure out how to reason well. And when do you have adequate reasons to reasonably claim a position? Have you done enough work to come to a conclusion that is a reasonable conclusion to hold? And people that are critical thinkers and reason well can say, and they disagree, can say, oh, I can see how you came to that conclusion. I don't think it's right because I think some of these premises are wrong, or I think you're jumping a bit too far with this premise being connected to this premise. So it's just by thinking well and thinking people and making different arguments. I don't know all of them. That would be a lot of things to study. Good question. Well, so you're asking if, say it again, genetic fallacy, we're talking about genetic fallacy. So it's the problem comes with the presuming that where it comes from means that it is that their conclusion is questionable, because an argument stands or falls based on the argument, not who said it or where it originated. So when is it? So do you have an example in mind where you think that the genetic fallacy is? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm. Right, which kind of goes, so the media argument kind of goes to the argument that I said for like an ad hominem, where it's not truly an ad hominem fallacy, because if it's irrelevant that this has been proven to be untrustworthy in the past, but it doesn't necessarily fully disqualify what they say, right? So just because and I was talking about this with Matt earlier. He was saying, yes, the media does have issues, but you can't completely throw out every single thing because you don't know every single thing that they're saying. it does put them on a lower, could be a bit more untrustworthy, raises your skepticism a bit, is what I would say. But yeah, if it's relevant, then it would be relevant, but not, don't. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what you'll see as well, is even in the ad hominem tu quoque, where you say, where the dad says to the son, you shouldn't smoke, smoking's bad for you, and he says, you smoke 3 packs a day. It's not it depends on what the kid is actually saying. If the kid is setting out to prove that his father's a hypocrite, that would be relevant information. But if his argument is to discredit what he says and discredit that smoking's bad for you, then that would be a tu quoque fallacy and a bad reason to reject that argument. That's what these things are. It's bad reasons to reject arguments. Yes?
The difference would be what the person is giving you. So if somebody's just giving you information like facts, then you can question their source, whether their source is trustworthy or not. But if somebody's giving you an argument and you reject the argument because they got the argument from a certain source, that's not a good reason to reject the argument. You've got to deal with the argument. So it depends on what they're giving you. Information, facts, or an argument.
I wanted to repeat that for the people on YouTube, but I don't think I can. So hopefully, just turn up your, go back and turn it up. Wikipedia. Yeah, throw it completely out. Wikipedia. Oh, you got it from Wikipedia? Nonsense. Got it. Good stuff, everybody. Yeah, and that's, it depends on what you're trying to do. Thank you. And that is exactly what happens here is, what are you trying to do? What are your reasons for what you're doing? Check them. Are they true? Is it relevant? Is it accurate? Is it clear and knowledgeable? Boom, I got all 5. Yes? Therefore, cut it completely out. Yeah, fallacy has to be, you have to, so yeah, I remember, guys, I gave you all these, this information about fallacies. Now you can kind of notice them in yourself, notice them in others, but be aware of the fallacy where you reject what the claim said based on them having bad reasons. Which I would say, if you want, when you have these conversations and you do notice something and you get excited about it, I would urge you, maybe don't say the name of the fallacy unless you kind of say it later, but just kind of explain what happened and explain why that is a poor reasoning. So explain like the definition of the fallacy, but maybe don't say the fallacy, because then you kind of come off not super charitable. And if you have a good rapport with them, you can just because if you're buddies with them or something, you're like, actually, dude, that's a straw man, and you knocked down a straw man. That wasn't me at all. It was someone made of hay. Thank you, Lauren. Okay, awesome stuff, guys. Any other questions? It is 9 o'clock-ish. I love it. Okay, I'll see you next week. Next week we have Will talking about the problem of evil, Lord willing. Yep.